Hot Fuzz, in my opinion, is the greatest comedy film of all time, and in this video I'm going to explain to people why. Hey there guys, Mr. Chicken Movies here, welcome back to another video, and today we are going to be reviewing Hot Fuzz. This film was directed by Edgar Wright, written by Edgar Wright and Simon Pegg, and stars Simon Pegg, Nick Frost, and so many others. This is the middle part of the Cornetto trilogy, which was started by Shaun of the Dead and completed by The World's End. And since then, all three of these films have really gone down as classics. But before I properly get into this video, I have to say, huge spoiler warning, I am going to be spoiling this film a lot. So if you guys haven't seen this movie, please watch it, it's brilliant, and then come back and watch this video. Spoilers ahead. So why do so many people think that Hot Fuzz is one of the best comedies of all time? Well, I think there's two main names you have to attribute this to. One of them is absolutely Edgar Wright, and the other one is Simon Pegg. So quickly starting with the Edgar Wright bit, one of the main reasons I think this is the best comedy of all time is because of direction. In terms of all the camera work used in this, Edgar Wright makes a conscious effort to be very snappy with all of the visuals and all of his storytelling, which is able to convey a lot of information without having to blurt it out to you. But what it also does in the film is it establishes a very fast pace and is even able to be humorous in the right places. It uses the camera a lot for visual humor, whether that's jump cutting for the sake of juxtaposition or using these epic montages to show mundane things like paperwork. It works really nicely in the film, because every scene that's framed is used in two ways. It's used for a joke and it's used to give us some setup. Whether it's information on our characters, or setting up the plot, or conveying some boring exposition scenes, every time it does it, it's funny. And this is also done with some great visual comedy through the editing. The editing is so sharp, so snappy. The sound editing is really good as well, and basically what we're able to do is we're able to basically put the film on fast forward when it's not interesting and use that as its own punchline. It's some pretty great filmmaking on the behalf of Edgar Wright and the team, and ultimately, these choices to make the most boring parts of filmmaking funny puts it levels above the average comedy that you would often see. Which is then when I go to the other part of it, which is the script, because I think what most people who write comedies nowadays do is they write a funny script and basically leave it there in terms of the humor. And the script itself is also really funny, but what they're able to do is no moment in this film is really wasted. Every line of dialogue has two meanings basically. It is set up in terms of its characters and their outlook on life, as well as it also being set up for something that happens later. Every line of dialogue is either a joke, a Chekhov's gun, or it's a genuine piece of development that the story needs. And sometimes what they do is they combine all three of them. One thing that I really like about this film is there really aren't any jokes necessarily that are wasted. A lot of comedy films will have scenes dedicated to one or two jokes, and in some worst cases, sequences dedicated to one or two jokes. What Hot Fuzz does right is every scene has its own meaning in the plot, and ultimately that meaning will sometimes come into play in later places, or illustrate different things that will happen later on, but you can point to pretty much every scene and say why it's useful. Whether it's for a joke or a payoff that happens later on, these so-called jokey scenes are actually very important to the film, because they're the real heart and soul here. And from that I have to say that the pacing is absolutely phenomenal. There are so many good jokes in this film, and later on there are loads of great callbacks to earlier bits of ironic humour they litter around the beginning of the film. There honestly isn't a single dull moment in Hot Fuzz, because no moment is ever wasted and no plotline is ever there for any reason other than to make us laugh or to contribute towards the story. And on the subject of the story, let's talk about the characters, because the real heart and soul of not just Hot Fuzz, but also Shaun of the Dead and The World's End is our characters, and that's the other bit that Simon Pegg does so well as co-writing the script. Simon Pegg gives a really good performance in this film, and I feel like comedic actors are often underrated in this, but he's genuinely great. His straight man persona works really nicely in the film, and when stuff gets real, he's also able to act as a really convincing protagonist. Because really, Simon Pegg's performance isn't just charming and comedic, it's also like a real character who's been thought out, not just a punchline. Similar things can be said for Nick Frost. He's actually hilarious in this film, and that's because they had a very clear idea of what to do with his character, and he also gives a very underrated performance in the film. Pairing these two together makes for a really fun action comedy parody sort of film, and by that what I mean is this film is a very clear homage to some of the more bombastic action films out there. What if you took this huge action hero and put him in a town where there's no crime? The influences of films like Bad Boys 2 and Point Break are really apparent in this film, and it works brilliantly. It's able to serve as both a parody to some of these action films as well as an alternative to them as well. Whether you love the movies or hate them, this film works because it's both mocking them, but it's lovingly mocking them as well. One idea that the film uses a lot is using combinations of taking a convention from a traditional action film, then flipping it on its head with more realistic ideas, only to go over the top with exaggeration and make it so that it was the convention over and over again. A great example is with Timothy Dalton's character being the villain. It's made very obvious to us from the start, only for it to then get flipped on its head when we realise it wasn't him, only for it then to get flipped on its head that he was. Ideas like this are so well done that I have to applaud the film. So much thought has gone into the script and pacing all of these bits of setup to the point where you can tell it's not just a silly comedy to these people. This is a real film with real logic that they're taking seriously. And all of the affection and care that has gone into making such clever little plot elements here, it works really well. Onto a couple of other smaller things that I really appreciated about this movie. For starters, I think the production design is actually quite underrated in this film. I think a lot of the use of sound and music is also really good in this movie. And lastly, I think the supporting cast are really good. I think it's really fun to see actors who either were famous already or who would later become big names appear in this film, and they all give their all, and honestly it adds to the humour some more knowing who some of these actors are. So yeah, in conclusion, Hot Fuzz is an amazing film. It's great as both a parody and a real take on the action genre. There's a clear amount of affection towards the genre that's shown by the people that make it, and they did a really good job playing around with expectations in it. I think the cast are all charming, I think the dialogue's great, the humour is so good, and the attention to detail in some of the filmmaking is absolutely brilliant. There's so much care and thought put into the script here and in the visual storytelling to the point where there's never a dull moment in this film. It's always funny in some way, and the amount of creativity exhibited by this film is just fantastic. This is what happens when you give a director and writer free control to make whatever film they like, and with so much care and effort they can make something truly special. And because of that, Hot Fuzz is the greatest comedy film of all time, in my opinion at least. I am slightly biased being English myself, but from a filmmaking standpoint I think you could argue that this truly is the best comedy ever made. And with that, I'd like to end the video here. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know down in your comments below what you think of Hot Fuzz. Is it your favourite film in the Cornetto trilogy, or does Shaun of the Dead and The World's End take the cake? Also, be sure to check out my Twitter at MrChickenMovies. But thank you very much for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to subscribe, like, and comment. And I will see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.